if a student really, they have a personal ambition to speak like an American or like a Brit or whatever, I'm not going to say, oh, don't bother, don't bother trying to do that. If it's their personal ambition, I won't try to dissuade them, but I'm not going to insist on they, try and pronounce word like a British person would or an American person would. I think American is the standard accent. I mean, I'm British. I teach English in Japan, and American tends to be the standard accent, but it's not. If a student can speak in an intelligible way, in a comprehensible way, it doesn't impede communication. I think that's the key point. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's the main thing that I go for, is can you actually communicate, and can you get your point across in the target language? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Hiroyuki, again, in the chat, is mentioning lingua franca, and I think this is a really good time to come on to the topic of lingua franca. So, a really good question is, what are the implications of English as a lingua franca, ELF, right? So we started off, many people teach EFL, English as a foreign language, and we're kind of, as a profession, moving from EFL to ELF, which is English as a lingua franca, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and what are the implications of English as a lingua franca for speech recognition systems or for teaching pronunciation? The idea is that it's more likely, I think non-native speakers outnumber native speakers of English more than 2 to 1, or maybe even 3 to 1, right? So there are more non-native speakers of English than there are native speakers in the world by quite a big margin. Okay, so the idea is that when somebody in a Japanese university or Korean university or anywhere in the world learns English, it's quite likely they're going to be using English to communicate with another person who is not a native speaker of English, right? So that's the kind of very, very common situation that English learners are finding themselves in, is using English as a lingua franca. So, I mean, Hiroyuki, again, thank you for your very proactive participation in the chat. He's asking, like, how can we make our English intelligible? Okay, so it's a very important question, and sometimes minor pronunciation, what we would maybe refer to as pronunciation errors, are not really errors if we're adopting English as lingua franca perspective. Do not affect intelligibility. I think one example of this might be the way that typically the German accent could switch around V's and W's, right? So it probably doesn't affect person's ability to comprehend the speech. Yeah. So one thing, let's move on to speech recognition a bit here. So one thing you can do with speech recognition is your speech clear enough for a computer to understand it? Okay, so the computer's level of understanding is lower than human. So if you can reach the computer's level of understanding, the computer's ability to understand you is lower than a human ability. Humans can use all kinds of contextual clues, the physical situation that you're in, what they think you're trying to achieve, and people like you and I, John, who lived in Japan a long time, we become accustomed to certain kinds of English speech, right? So when you say, English speech is comprehensible or intelligible, I think the question is comprehensible or intelligible to who? So a scripted speech recognition is when the computer knows what you're trying to say. So basically, coming back to, for example, the Harvard sentences, yeah. If you told the computer, look, the student is trying to say the birch canoe slid on the smooth planks. How close was their pronunciation to the typical English speaker? And again, it comes back to what accent, what speaker are you using as a model? So that's scripted. Scripted is when the computer knows what you're trying to say, and it's saying, well, how close was the speaker to the way that this sentence should be said, should be pronounced, yeah? Unscripted is when the computer has no idea what you're trying to say, and it has to transcribe what you're trying to say. So that's
with an unscripted one, would you, if anyone's ever used, for example, Google Translate, and there's, you can, I'm assuming this is what this is like, as an unscripted mode of speech recognition where you touch on the microphone button and then you say what you want to say, and then it's automatically translated into the target second language here.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Paul, and that would be unscripted mode of speech recognition, correct?
Yeah. So I'd like to show some examples now, actually, of speech recognition on ZenGengo. Okay, so let me bring up the page here. So what ZenGengo allows you to do as a teacher is to specify your own utterances and then require the student to say those sentences. Okay, so I'm just going to go to an example of generous recognition here. So we have in our own speech recognizer, we have two modes of recognition. One is generous and one is strict. The generous model uses closed or scripted recognition. The computer knows what the user is trying to say, so it's more likely to recognize it correctly. The strict model is open or unscripted, and it doesn't know what the user is trying to say, and it has to do its best to try to transcribe it accurately. Is that pretty clear, John, do you think?
Absolutely.
So here's an example of generous speech recognition, and we have the Harvard sentence here. I'm going to read this out here. The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks. And that goes off to our recognizer, and you can see that I got everything correct. So the computer, it knew what I was trying to say, which gave it an advantage because the combinations of words that were possible for that particular utterance were constrained to a much smaller corpus. Yeah. Now I can miss out a word here, and you can see that it would give it a question mark. The birch canoe on the smooth planks. So I should, yeah, there you see, I didn't say the word slid, so it doesn't recognize the word slid. Okay, now if I put on an accent, and I don't really want to do this, but I think I'll leave people to experiment with for themselves because I am a proponent of English as a lingua franca. I don't think that a katakana accent, as Professor Obari was saying, or any other kind of accent should be penalized by a teacher if it does not impede comprehensibility. Yeah, so if a student has a slight katakana accent, this generous mode of recognition within ZenGengo will give them, more likely than not, give them a positive feedback. Yeah. Now, we also have another mode of recognition, which is strict. Okay, and I can show this one, for example. So this strict mode of recognition, again, the computer has no idea what the user is trying to say. So the enunciation, the pronunciation, the clarity of speech is much more important because the computer doesn't have any contextual clues as to what the user is trying to say. Okay, so let me try this one. The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks. Hopefully my speaking is clear enough for that to come back with 100%. This returned a result. You can see that I didn't pronounce the word birch clearly enough for the computer to understand what I was trying to say. So let me try again. The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks. And you can see how clearly I have to enunciate. There we go. So now it's this is much more strict recognition. If students really want to improve their enunciation, their pronunciation, and they want this kind of strict level of feedback, then we have that two modes, generous and strict. So this is Xavier Anguera. He has over 20 years of experience in speech and signal processing technologies. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed research papers, and he holds multiple patents in the areas of multimedia, machine learning, deep learning, and artificial intelligence. He has worked extensively in both academia and in the corporate world, and he is currently the CTO at ELSA, where he builds state-of-the-art speech technology to help people improve their pronunciation and intonation skills. That's quite an amazing CV, Xavier.
Thank you. I mean, we do our work, right?
Yes, but I think the 100 peer-reviewed papers by itself is a remarkable achievement.
It's some people, I was very lucky in my career that I was in institutions where they allowed me to do a lot of research, and that really helped push that. I don't consider myself like doing something remarkably different from everybody else in the speech area, but I was lucky to have the time to do them. Yes.
Okay, I understand it. The modesty is very very nice. Thank you. I think I just want to show the ELSA website here. I'm just going to share my screen and show the ELSA website. So can I just check? ELSA started, was it around about 2015? Was it? Is that correct?
Yeah. 2015. Yeah.
Okay, and I believe that ELSA is primarily an app for your smartphone, but it's also an API, right? Which I want to talk about later. But it's primarily an app. Is that correct?
For now, yes. Stay tuned, because we are working on a web version, slightly different, but we'll soon have some news. Yeah, nowadays we have the app, which has been out since 2015, and both iOS and Android, with lots of downloads. I think we are close to the 20 million mark now. And like a year, 2 years ago, we started getting lots of requests from companies to use our technology, to use our AI in their own products, because they were building things that were different to ours. Our goal is to get improved communication of students, and we can talk about the difference between pronunciation and communication of students. So we opened up the API to the same AI that we use for the app. So that's what we have now. Yeah.
Yes, and we as a company, ZenGengo, are also very interested in working, with your API. So I'd like to talk about that a bit later. But before we get into the API, perhaps we can explore the app a little bit more. We have some questions, I think. John, can we go to Xavier's questions?
And so, most importantly here, Xavier, does AI really work to help people improve their English communication skills?
It does. So for a long time, we were trying to get some evidence of that. We've had lots of students coming to us and giving us feedback that using the ELSA app improved one way or one aspect or other of their lives. I mean, either getting the necessary skill or the necessary fluency to go into an IELTS exam, or go into a new job, or losing the fright to speaking in English, which is something that lots and lots of people have. They know how to read and write it, but when speaking it, they don't really feel comfortable with it. So going into the ELSA app really helped them. But we didn't really have these clear evidence, like scientific evidence that did actually help. And last year, 2021, we were lucky. We participated with a university in India called CMR University, where more than 200 and something students, they downloaded the app, and as part of one of the courses in the university, they used it every single day for 6 weeks, I believe. And so we were able to track their progress. And this is people that they were not obliged, but they were nudged to every day do a few lessons on the app, right? And we see that in average over the 6 weeks, there was a significant, statistically significant improvement on their overall pronunciation, intonation, fluency skills. With general users of the app, where we don't control as much the testing conditions, but we do see over 80% of them improved. There is the remaining 20% that, as we cannot control, they might not be using the app, or they might be just testing things out, and we see a much more varied shape, like sometimes improve, sometimes doesn't, but 80% is consistent improve over more than 1 million people that we looked at for the last 9 months of use of the app as well. So we can say that AI can help improving communication pronunciation skills for users.
Okay, thank you, Xavier. It's really, really interesting. I want to kind of, I'm just curious about what exactly is being measured, because I know that ELSA is more than just pronunciation. It's pronunciation, it's fluency, there's intonation as well as part of it. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And
So
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no. Yeah, I'm going to try to connect the phone to screencast it.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I can show you my phone. Let
That
me
would be
see.
great.
Does it work here? Yes. It's just to show you that I'm actually myself. I didn't fake it in the app, and I don't have a very good pronunciation and intonation yet. So working on it. Do you see my screencasted phone?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yeah. So see, this is my Pentagon. This is me, my profile, one of my profiles, and this is my Pentagon. It says I'm 79%. Actually, I'm probably 80, 86, 87. At least that's what my assessment test says. And you see here that we are measuring 5 different dimensions. In fact, you can see below word stress and intonation. They could be considered one single thing, but we separate them because there are very unique exercise types that we teach in the app. So listening is actually minimal pairs, is the perceptual part of listening. So can you differentiate between the sounds in the language? And then pronunciation is the sound production, accentedness. And we can go into, if you want, into the difference between pronunciation or accent reduction and intelligibility. I'm totally open to talk about that. And then fluency, it's a cadence of speech, is where you pause, is part of part of energy and pitch as well. And intonation, we measure intonation as a whole, so overall intonation that you do in the sentence, as well as word prominence. Do you make the right words prominent? So yeah, we are in the pronunciation part. We are focusing on American accent. So we will release in the future other British, other accents, as well as other languages. On the other skills, it's more generic because you basically pronounce fluency and intonation and word stress. It's common for all the different accents in English. And in fact, in what we call intelligibility, how a person is perceived by others, fluency plays a very big role. So yeah, so we measure these sort of things. You can see here in the app, in the main screen, you see all the different planets, and you can practice the different skills in here. You also have the intonation planet over here, where you can practice intonation. So the app is structured into skills or planets. Then you go into modules and lessons. Every lesson is focused on a specific skill or a specific thing you're going to practice. Skills in the accent part. So you're going to practice about schwa, you're going to practice about chez eux, whatever, or you're going to do word stress, you're going to do sentence word prominence, overall sentence intonation, etc. Right? Yeah.
I just want to come back briefly. You mentioned minimal pairs. Some of our audience might not be familiar with minimal pairs. So, for example, I think like ship and sheep. There's a well-known book called Ship or Sheep. And another example would be pilot and pirate. So there are two words where only one phoneme is different. Is that correct, Xavier?
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big problem I had when I was first time I went into the US, where I told my boss that I had a very nice sheet of paper for him, and so he started laughing at me because he knew about my Spanish. So yeah, it's about these words that the only difference is that of a specific sound in the word that not everybody can differentiate. For example, I believe you probably are in Japan, right? And it's very common, the R and L difference there, which for me, a Spaniard, doesn't make any, I mean, I hear perfectly the difference, but for Japanese learners at the beginning, they struggle a little bit with it. So yeah.
So the pronunciation, you're saying at the moment, it does use American accent as a kind of a model. Would that be correct?
Yes, totally correct. Yes. Yeah, because when you teach pronunciation, or then you need to focus on one specific accent. It wouldn't make sense. So I think we talked with you, Paul, before about the Lingua Franca core, which it's a sort of a mixture of some traits from different accents. It's sort of, okay, this general English, in my opinion, okay, this is all my opinion. It doesn't make sense to teach that in an app like this, because that would mean that somebody could make a British accent in one exercise, an American accent in the other, Australian accent in the other exercise, and then what? Should we consider all of them correct? Or should we force them to do a specific trait of each accent so that even an American or a British speaker wouldn't get 100% of it? So it's all controversial, right? So we decided a long time ago at the beginning that the accent that we considered would be most acceptable or most general to start with would be American. And so on the pronunciation side or pronunciation part, we focus on that. That doesn't mean that, okay, if you come with a heavy British accent into the app, you will see that on those phonemes that your pronunciation is different to American. We do call them off, right? We do tell you, hey, this is wrong. And eventually we will have a second app or second version where you can select your accent and say, okay, then for British, those are acceptable, right? But I think, we do need to create this clear separation so that the learner knows exactly what he's trying to get to. And that's on the pronunciation side, because fluency, intonation, word stress, minimal pairs, in many of the minimal pairs, right? This doesn't apply anymore, because this is already then only basically pure communication in English.
But the important thing is that ELSA helps you to become a more intelligible and a more comprehensible speaker. That's the case, right?
Well, yeah, let me tell you about that. So, and for the people that are listening, maybe it's a bit of a sort of contradictory things, right? So, accentedness and intelligibility are two very different aspects of communication, or let's say pronunciation, communication. I don't know the naming convention here, how it would be, but accentedness is how the person that speaks, what type of sounds he produces. So are you producing an American accent, a British accent, Australian accent, or something in the middle? While intelligibility, it depends very much on how the user that hears hears this speech perceives it. So it could perfectly be that me as a Spanish speaker, I have an accent. I haven't lost my accent in English at all. But when I speak to you, you understand 100% of what I say. So I am 100% intelligible to you, right? But I still have an accent, and I'm still called off, and I have 79 here, which I need to work on my accent. But so I have not native yet accent in English, because I do a lot of small mistakes in there. But those mistakes, they are small, and they do not affect my intelligibility to others, right? So this is very important. Now, intelligibility on itself is very difficult to measure, because intelligibility depends a lot on the person that listens. So depends a lot on the expertise or language adaptation of the person that listens. And it also depends a lot on the relationship between the speaker and the listener. So if I am Spaniard and I speak English to another Spaniard, probably he understands me much better than if I speak English to somebody from Australia or somebody from somewhere else, right? And if you, Paul, you are in Japan, a Japanese speaks English to you, you will probably understand them much better than if they speak English to me, right? Because you are already attuned to it. So they will be more intelligible to you. So intelligibility is a very difficult thing to measure, and depends on a lot of parameters. Now, accentedness is something that is it's a mispronunciation detection, is something that can be scientifically measured, and that's what we try to do in the app. Now, how do you improve intelligibility? And that's where we go, right? You improve intelligibility by doing the proper fluency, and that's one of the things we measure here, and partially also correctly pronouncing the right sounds in the right places. And what do I mean with that? Not all sounds are the same. Like not all sounds are as important. Some sounds in some words, and it depends on the word, right? Some words, for example, if you make a mistake in one of the specific sounds in the word, the listener will not understand it. But if you make a mistake in another sound of the same word, doesn't matter, because it's unique enough what is well pronounced that the listener can understand it without a problem. And without a problem means without a very increased cognitive load, let's say, right? Because intelligibility is also about that. It's like, how much attention do you need to pay the listener to understand what the speaker is saying, right? So yeah, I always say, we do have an app that is for accent reduction, but we do help, by using our app, you will become more intelligible. Now, in the future, we hope to have in the app also the metric of intelligibility.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Xavier. And thank you. You've confirmed something that John and I were talking about before, that that we, having lived in Japan a long time, would probably understand somebody with a strong katakana accent better than someone like you who maybe has not lived in Japan or never visited Japan. That's the case, right? So intelligibility depends on both interlocutors, the listener and the speaker, whereas accentedness is a kind of a objective standard. Would that be correct?
Exactly. It's much more objective, because you can really compare it to, and it only depends on one variable. It depends on the person that speaks, and you compare it to whatever the ground truth is, or the core accent. In this case, it's American English, right? So you just measure this one distance. In intelligibility, you have lots of parameters that modify things and that can affect it, right? Yeah.
Xavier, with your permission, we touched on the fact that ELSA is an app. It's an iOS app. It's an Android app. People can download it right now and start using it, right? Yes. There's also an API. Now, you mentioned a web app is coming. That has me a little bit concerned, because we're making a web app using ELSA. So I hope we don't replicate too much of what you're going to do anyway. But with your permission, I'd like to show the ELSA API working through ZenGengo. Would that be okay?
Of course.
Yep. Okay. Let me share my screen. So what ZenGengo allows teachers to do is actually to specify their own sentences. So a teacher might be teaching some very specific sentences, maybe relating to, I don't know, like if the students are training to become pilots or nurses, or they could be like medical English, or they could be, general English. So ZenGengo is a platform for teachers primarily to create digital web-based activities for their students. Before you arrived, I was showing some other forms of speech recognition that we have on ZenGengo, but we also have the ability for teachers to integrate with ELSA. And this is a Harvard sentence that includes some of the different phonemes in the English language. That's why it's a bit of a strange sentence. But if I'm going to read this sentence in my standard British accent, okay, and let's see the score that ELSA gives me. And maybe you could explain how these scores are produced. So let me try this. The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks. So that audio file is being whisked off to the ELSA endpoint. Okay, so we have three basic scores. We have pronunciation 98, intonation 78, and fluency 90. Yeah, so I did pretty well on my pronunciation. I can, I'm going to try this with a slight katakana accent here. I'm not trying to mock any Japanese speaker. I'm just trying to demonstrate the different feedback here that is given by ELSA. So let me try with a slight katakana accent. So. Zabać kanu slid on the smooth planks. So let's see if that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we have obviously it's a little bit more further away from the ideal pronunciation, and clicking on a word will actually dig down into phonetic feedback, and then hovering over the word will give advice. And this is part of the ELSA API, right? The advice is given on how to pronounce these phonemes correctly. Is that right, Xavier?
Yeah, so in pronunciation there is two components. There is the pronunciation error, the error detection, and the diagnosis. So at ELSA, we really believe that the diagnosis part is the most important part we can help with, because that's when we try to understand, and I'm saying we try because this is a hard thing many times. We try to understand what's the problem that could have happened in that position and in that phoneme, and then we give feedback to the learner on how he could try to improve it. Because we saw, like, prior when we started, we saw that there were applications out there that were giving feedback at the word level, saying, hey, this word is wrong. And you're like, okay, but you know why, right? So that's why we went into two steps down. One step is, okay, let's give feedback on the phoneme level. And second step is let's actually tell people what we think is happening there.
That's right. Yes. So so that phoneme level feedback is very, very fine grain, and it can be given in the user's L1, I think, can't it? Maybe some variety of languages like Vietnamese or Chinese or different languages like that.
Yeah. No, in the API and also in the ELSA app, we have adapted. We have translated the feedback so that we give it on some of the L1s where we have most users. We are translating it to that, and then we do some things on the back. So when the user starts the app, it's important they select the right language, the right L1, and then we do some adaptations to how we detect the errors and how we give some of the feedback due to that.
I'm just curious, you mentioned like when somebody starts learning a foreign language, they come to it with, I'm not sure the word you use, like the inventory of phonemes from their first language. So I'm familiar with like a critical period hypothesis that says you can't really master pronunciation in a foreign language after a certain age. Do you agree with that kind of critical period hypothesis, or is it possible to really improve your pronunciation as an adult, do you think?
I think so. I think so. I mean, your brain might not have as much plasticity, but I think so. I mean, I do not have evidence, or I haven't looked for it because we don't ask our learners what age they are. But I really believe that some of our ELSA users are really grown-ups and older people, and it's basically just whenever you really want to put emphasis on learn something. The question is whether you're going to put enough emphasis on it and enough time on it, and whether your brain is fully on it or not. But I think so. I think learning is something that happens throughout your life. Yeah,
it's never too late, basically.
Exactly.
If you
in my thinking, right? I mean,
right. And of course, ELSA can go in your pocket, so it can go anywhere that you go, and anytime you have free 5 minutes, you can whip out your phone and you can practice.
Yeah, that's the whole idea.
Yep.
The only thing is it's a speaking app, so you better try to find a calm place so that when you're speaking, you're not bothering people, and the app is actually capturing your voice and not your neighbors. But yeah. I'll show you my app, and I'll go to, so we go here in the recommended in the explore panel. Okay, if you go down, not everybody will have it, but if you see this ELSA speech analyzer, this is something we just released. You can tap on it, and this is a totally new technology we are exploring. So this will allow you to record your speech, not read it, just give answers as if you were in the IELTS exam. You see IELTS part 1, 2, and 3. You can also do a mock interview with open-ended questions. So you give an answer as well as you can, and then we will analyze the same things you saw. So intonation, fluency, pronunciation, and we will also analyze grammar and vocabulary. So this is a new technology. We are using non-native adapted speech recognition. So it recognizes what you said. And this is something we are testing out. So please test it out. If it doesn't work for you, send us feedback and we will improve it. It's we are releasing it this week. So I think it's something that you guys can be the first ones to test it. And you have to go to the Explore tab and then you see it here, okay? And not everybody will see it. If you don't see it, there is a trick. You can re-download, you can delete the app, re-download it, and see if you have the you have the lucky one, because there is a percentage of users we are releasing it to.
That's
okay.
great. Thank you. Yeah, we were talking before about scripted and unscripted recognition, and I believe
Exactly. That's about it.
That's an example of unscripted, right? Because
unscripted.
It doesn't know what you're trying to say, so it can be part of maybe a genuine or a lifelike conversation rather than just listen and repeat or read aloud, for example. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, there is quite a lot of interesting things that interesting aspects of speech that appear when you have to think of an answer and you're not reading it. Your speech changes a lot. Also, the breadth of vocabulary you use, the grammar you use. It's a whole different dimension of challenging communication that we really wanted to explore for a long time. And in the recent couple of years, speech technology, the speech recognition has become good enough for us to venture into this area. So yeah.
And I've got to ask just one question here, and that we might be going off script. As a language teacher here, and we talked about this on a previous webinar that we did specifically about AI. And I'm kind of wondering here, Xavier, do you envision something like ELSA, an app like ELSA? Do you envision that replacing the language teacher or aiding the language teacher?
No, don't worry, John.
Should I be looking for a new job?
No, actually, I've talked in other places as well. I'm very big proponent of the blended education concept. I think that when I was a kid and I was going to language school, and I went a lot to language school, that was like my after class, after school thing in the evening. There were like 12, 15 people there and one teacher and 1 hour. I mean, how much did I get to speak? I was very outspoken. I kind of spoke a lot, but some of the more introverts in the room, they spoke one sentence in the whole hour. I mean, how much communication, how much pronunciation will you learn on that? I mean, and could the teacher go stop and say, oh, improve that one still you haven't improved? Maybe sometimes he did, but many times they didn't have time. So if we can go and have this blended education where the teachers with groups or even in person, they try to teach grammar, vocabulary, even pronunciation to students, and then this is enhanced with at-home practice or at-home or anywhere practice where the content is very similar. I think that's where the student will get the most of it, because he gets to really practice what he couldn't practice at school and still get a very reasonable feedback. Of course, it's an AI feedback. I'm not saying we are giving the better feedback than some of the very good teachers out there of English, but very decent feedback and very decent help to advance. And they will go back to the next lesson, physical lesson, and they will have learned that material, right? And the fact that we are focusing on the pronunciation part and we are not focusing on teaching you the vocabulary and the grammar. I think all that needs a lot more explanation than just an app that just you click, right? So sometimes everybody will learn things at different pace, and the fact that there is a teacher teaches you, explains you why are things, what are the examples, what are the things that don't work in the standard way, etc. That's very good. Yeah, don't worry. I think you are part of my grand plan for the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Xavier.
Yeah, human teachers still have a job. That's great to hear.
For a long time, yeah.
I think I'd like to wrap up a little bit now. I've had some questions about whether the recording of this webinar will be available. Yes, it will. It will be posted to tiltal.org. Tiltal stands for Technology in Language Teaching and Learning, which is the group that organized this webinar today. So you can go to tiltal.org and you can find this webinar and many others that could be useful, interesting to you as language teachers. You can also join our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/tiltal. And here you can learn about this webinar and others like it coming up. So yeah, please join Tiltal Facebook group. Today, you were listening to Xavier Anguera, who is the CTO of ELSA. ELSA is an app that you can download today and use for free, but you could also subscribe if you want to benefit from some of the more advanced features. If you would like to use the ELSA API and you are a language teacher, please check out ZenGengo. ZenGengo allows you to specify your own sentences that could be recognized using the ELSA API. And finally, last but not least, please do go ahead and subscribe to John's channel, which is Education Solutions YouTube channel, where he introduces some very, very useful technology for teachers of many different subjects. Okay, that's a wrap, I think, as they say. So thank you, Xavier, and thank you, John.
Thank you all very much.